Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. I'm like, oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped two
Hey,
tabs
everybody.
and I lost
Welcome
my
back.
friends.
It's Rip City
Oh
Real Talk.
Lord,
We're
here we
back for
go
another
again. I
episode,
just
and
dropped
my
two
best buddy,
tabs and
Anthony
I lost
Blaylock's
my
here to
friends.
go
Oh
through some
Lord, here we go
crazy
again. I
Blazer
just
news
dropped
this
two
week. I'm Craig
tabs and I
Moshkow,
lost
your
my
host,
friends.
and we want to talk about some of the stuff, and we also want to speculate a little bit about Blazers' future. But before we do any of that, how's it going, my friend?
Oh, it's not going so bad. Last time we talked, you survived a twister. I
Mhm.
survived historic heat in the Portland area. So, all in all, I mean, I would say that it was a much more calm week.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too much else going on, man. Honestly, been watching just watching some of the finals, checking out some of the Olympic stuff, and I kind of watched the first home run derby I think I've ever watched. I'm not really much of a baseball guy, I'm more
Sure.
basketball and football, but I watched some of the baseball stuff, and I'm gonna be honest with you, the home run derby was fun. It was cool. I watched Alonzo just go out there and make this stuff look ridiculously easy. Like it was crazy to me that there are guys that can just do that and smack the ball and just be, I don't know, just incredible baseball players. I'm not
Yeah.
a baseball guy, but it was fun, and I got my first look at the Ohani. I think is his name. What's his name?
Hmm.
The new
Otani.
Japanese. The new Japanese rage.
Yep.
Saw him live. Saw him live. Went to my first baseball game in a long time up in
Nice.
Seattle. Watched the Mariners beat the Angels. So that was pretty cool. That's about all that's going on with me. How about you?
Not a lot, man. I've been just checking Twitter a lot. This is kind of a weird time where the Olympics are
Yeah.
going on, and it's a very shortened off season. So we know that there's going to be a lot of news hitting the
Yep.
streets fast. The trades are going to happen fast. So I've been trying to keep an eye on that, but it's been tough. The Olympic stuff is kind of hard to follow because it is at weird times for us during the day. So I think it's easy to record it and peep it later. But so far, I've just been checking Twitter a lot for kind of the updates because everything's going on, so it's so prevalent. The news dumps are constant, especially in Blazerland, I feel like.
Yeah, here I am just telling you a little bit about my personal self, giving the viewers an insight to me, and you're just all business. I can appreciate that.
eh,
Nobody gets to know about Craig's life. That's all
eh.
right, fine. You know what? I'm glad glad you're on it, man. You're more serious about
I'm
this
not
than I
going to
am.
live sports
Uh,
or doing anything fun, so
no, that's true. Your life is pretty boring. that's, you have chickens now, and it's the whole thing.
chickens.
So,
Exactly.
um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, rumors pretty much the rest of this pod for most of the off season until we really get into summer league, until the Olympics really get going. And obviously, until free agency starts, there's going to be a lot of these little things. We're going to see a lot of little rumors. We're going to talk about them, give our opinions on them, and that's a good point. We have quite a few of those to go over today. Not too many, I
Mhm.
guess, but there's little things that we'll talk about. But before we get into that, man, we obviously want to start talking about the first two additions to Billups' coaching staff. We've already pretty much covered Billups. I mean, about as in depth as we could probably cover him to this point, and he's done. He's coach, and he's starting to fill out his squad. His main backup assistant coach, or whatever you want to call him, a head assistant. I don't really know the official terminology.
Yeah.
And then one of the guys has been added to his staff. I think, when we saw some of these names pop up, I think most of Blazerland, at least in some of the media outlets that we follow, weren't super impressed by the names. I'm not one of those guys. I actually don't mind the two guys that we brought in. The first one and the lead assistant head coach, or not head coach, but lead assistant coach,
Mhm.
is Scott Brooks. So Scott Brooks, people who don't know, I spent about 7 years in Oklahoma City and then about another 5 years with Washington as the head coach of both of those teams, and had regular season wise quite a bit of success and actually quite a bit of playoff success in OKC. He did get to the second round one time in Washington, but overall he went 5-2 as far as seasons making the playoffs. So 5 seasons where he made the playoffs in OKC, 2 where they didn't. And then 3-2 in Washington. So in his 5 years there, he made the playoffs 3 times, missed them twice. And to put it fairly, the 2 times that they missed playoff with the bubble, and then the year before, both years they didn't have John Wall. He was hurt. It was basically just the Beal show. And I don't care what team you're on or what conference you're in, one All-Star is going to make it very difficult on you to do anything. Ask Portland. So I'm all for it, man. I'm actually happy that we got a guy that has not just a decent amount of head coaching experience to be a lead assistant, considering Chauncey has 1 year of coaching experience as an assistant. I think it's good to get a guy that has had a lot of success, at least in the regular season, working with stars and making the playoffs. So I'm not so upset about it. What about you?
I like Scotty Brooks. I think he's a good a perfect assistant coach to a guy like Chauncey, who doesn't have experience leading a team from the bench. When you're looking at Scott Brooks, he's got, like you said, a very solid resume. I think these last couple of years, these Washington teams were pretty talentless outside of Beal. They really had, this year especially, they had no business. I mean, Russell Westbrook put that team on his back for a while, and Beal was obviously at times an MVP candidate early on in the year, but that team was not very good. And if you're looking at the OKC teams, they were top heavy too. They had a lot of talent, but I feel like he took them to the playoffs a lot of times. He was really consistent. I don't know why anyone wouldn't be a fan of Scott Brooks. I mean, maybe it's because he, quote unquote, didn't make enough adjustments, or all the weird stuff you hear people say about the NBA coaching. But at the end of the day, it's a players' league to us. It's a talent-based league. And he did a nice job maximizing that talent. He did a really good job with Russell Westbrook of this last year, catering to his style and letting Russ play within himself. And I think that he's going to do the same thing for Dame and CJ or whoever's on this roster this year. We have no idea still. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a really good assistant with a lot of experience to help guide Chauncey through the difficult waters and navigate the difficult waters that are NBA coaching. He's going to have to do pressers. He's going to be responsible for a lot of media duties I don't think he understands or has done yet to this level. So I think Scott Brooks can help with that.
I agree. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's won 55% of his games in the regular season. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this is Billups' team. I agree with you. We're not big on the whole coaching. I mean, coaching makes a difference, sure, especially utilizing certain system sets and role players and getting the best out of some of those guys. But end of the day, it is a players' league. It's a stars league. I don't care who your coach is. All that being said, I mean, Billups is still going to be the guy that run the show. It's still going to be what he wants to do. He's going to be the guy out there motivating, and Brooks is going to be the perfect assistant behind him from a game-to-game basis. I mean, you have 82 regular season games, or at least I expect us to go back up to 82 next year. So when you start thinking about that, I mean, that's a lot of experience. It's going to be great to have in Chauncey's ear. He's going to have a lot of questions. He's going to have a lot of things to where he's going to need to have a good second pair of lips talking in his ear, just really giving him advice and things that he can follow. And out of all the guys that are out there available, I mean, you're not going to find too many guys that have this kind of head coaching experience and this kind of experience running successful teams. Yeah. And again, in the regular season, playoffs are a bummer. He'd really only got out of the first round a couple of times, once in Washington, and then OKC obviously had their title run and all that, and they were pretty solid. I don't know enough about Brooks to tell you what his X's and O's philosophies are like. I agree with you. I've heard negative things about how he adjusts, that he's not a good playmaker and caller. He's obviously not touted to be a defensive-minded guy. But I think just managing a team, roster, depth charts, rotations, things along those lines is where he's going to be helpful for Billups. And Billups is going to be able to make those decisions at the end of the day, but it's good to have a guy that has experience leading it. So, again, not mad at Brooks. I saw some of the other names that were coming up. Vinny Del Negro. No, thank you. You weren't good when you were a coach. Yeah. And then, Hollins was another name that was out there for a while. That was one of the candidates for lead assistant role. And I liked him because he was part of those Memphis teams that were part of the whole grindhouse thing for years, and really, really, really good defensive teams. But at the end of the day, I mean, Brooks, to me, is not really a bad decision. It's a no-brainer. It's a guy that's going to come in and do everything that we just said.
I don't understand the outrage. Why would fans be upset about it? Like, what did you think they were going to do? Lionel Hollins was the only guy everybody liked more, and it's only for the reasons you mentioned. He was shorter tenure in the league, and he had good defensive teams. That's it.
I don't know, man. I don't. The Blazers media right now, fans are just in a flux. It's tough. It's rough. You're seeing Dame rumors left and right. You knocked out of the playoffs again. It's just, we're in a world of hate right now, and a lot of people were not on the Billups thing because of obviously Billups' past. They're all mad at Neil for this and that. Everybody's it's negative. It's a negative time, and as a fan, this is what you do. You ride the ups and downs of your team, and we're down right now. So who knows? People, that's where they're at with things. The good news is I do like the other assistant that they brought in, Roy Rogers. Yeah, great drink, by the way. Also, a pretty decent assistant with a lot of assistant coach experience. He was on some of the Doc Rivers teams when he was back in the Celtics. So when they were obviously at their rise with the big three, he was part of them. He also spent a lot of years with the Nets, which is meh. spent a little bit of time with the Bulls. He's kind of been around. He's floated around the league a lot. He spent last year with Chauncey Billups in LA. And that's one of the main reasons that I like him. He's going to be a guy that Chauncey knows. He knows his coaching style. He's going to have a familiar face on the bench with him. And he's been touted as a really, really good big man coach, which I think is great considering, let's say we keep this roster together, you don't move CJ, whatever, then Nurk is really going to have to be at peak form, some of the best Nurk that we've really seen, because he's going to immediately be our third option. And this is a guy that we're talking about that's really good at working with bigs. Dwight Howard in Houston, a lot of those years, this was the guy responsible for a lot of Howard's run. So everything I've seen out of it is that with Zubac in LA, he was a big factor into Zubac's improvement. I mean, we're not talking about an all-star caliber center by any means, but obviously he was a good enough big to play big minutes and play good minutes when he was out there, considering who he's playing with. So for Nurk, I'm all about it. Slowing him down, the footwork, concentrating, when the shoot, all the positioning, all those things are going to be big. Nurk's going to be a big focal point of our team, at least this year, at least as of right now. I mean, obviously a lot can happen, trades and all that, but if we're looking at the team as is, I think he's a good fit for that. He's also known to be a good defensive coach as far as his philosophies go. You pair that up with being good with big men, I'm all for it. It's a good assistant in my mind, and a good guy that Chauncey knows. So what do you think about that?
I loved it. I thought it was good. I had never really heard his name a lot. Obviously he's not a well-known coach amongst casual fans, I'm sure. But once I did my research and I figured out the teams that he was on, people that he coached, I heard the same things you did. Defensive specialist, really good at developing big men. You take a guy like Zubac, who was not even, he was in a Lakers trade a few years ago, and he was never really even an NBA role player. And they developed him into a borderline starter and a guy that you could count on as a center. I think the biggest thing is the Blazers have had a hard time developing big men because Nurkic is good. And he is good, but he's inconsistent. And I'd like to see more consistency out of him. I think all of us would. The other thing is the Blazers haven't really had a very talented front court to really match up with the backcourt. And I think that we need to focus on that in coaching. I think we need to work through some of that, get some of these guys to play more power forward and more center, and develop guys. Now, a lot of that is due to Zach Collins' injury. A lot of that's due to some of the injuries we've had to young guys. Swanigan didn't pay out. There's just a lot of issues that the Blazers have had with that personnel side. But I like Rodgers. I thought he was a fantastic hire once I did my research.
Yeah, he's obviously a career assistant guy. He's been an assistant for years, and sure, he's not a top assistant, or he probably would have been mentioned in head coaching jobs for a long time. But at the same time, the things that he's good at, the reason you're bringing him in fits a team need right now. So I'm excited for that. I think that's a good move. Yeah. I'm happy that he's going to be the one to pair with Brooks as an assistant, and hopefully Chauncey continues to get guys like this that are going to be able to improve.
What did you think after all this stuff settled down this week? Becky Hammon came out and basically said she knew she was in second place, or she knew that she wasn't their favorite candidate. What did you make of those comments, and how did that make you feel when you read that article?
No, I was happy for her. It seems weird. I still like her as a coach. We talked about it. She's probably still my favorite out of the candidates that were out there, but I'm happy for her because I still think she needs to stay in San Antonio. There's just something about Popovich retiring, passing the torch on to her, being the first female coach, and that kind of an organization that's just always seems to be stand up. Good. I'm glad that we passed you up, and I'm glad that you're going to get a chance, hopefully, to take the reins for the Spurs. Good for you. As far as her comments go, I don't think it was meant in a negative light. I think we've all been in interviews where we've all had that same feeling. Like, the interview goes good, sure. You get another interview, great. But you just know, based on the way they're talking, little mannerisms like, oh, yeah, we're just going to finish interviewing all the other candidates and we'll let you know. You know what I mean? You can kind of get a sense. And I think that's what this is. And I think people are making not a big deal about it, because it is a big deal. It's potentially the first female head coach in the NBA, really probably in any major sports league, at least as far as NFL, MLB, the major ones. So I think there's been a lot of spotlight on her, especially making a second interview. It's her first real time going after a head coaching position, I think, that at least made mainstream media because of the Portland issue with Chauncey and the rest of it. So it is what it is. I mean, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people took it as, oh, well, Neil was never actually going to hire her. It was all PR stunt, and that very well could be. I mean, I'm not in there. I don't know. But I also think that Billups was going to be the guy from day one. I think that his relationship with Neil, his relationship with the players, Dame, being an ex-player and a point guard in the NBA, all the experience and accolades that came with him, I think that he was prime target number one regardless. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is how she felt, because it's probably how they made her feel. And I guess I can't blame them. If you're an employer and you have your eyes set on a guy, then that's how it is. And they gave her a fair shot. They interviewed her. I would hope that it was a fair shot. And at least she got to go through the interview process. And again, I mean, she's going to hopefully end up in San Antonio, which to me is a much better fit anyway. So,
yep, I'm with you. I mean, it makes sense to me. It all made sense. I didn't really care too much about when I read it. It didn't like affect me in any way. I think the main thing was I just hope she gets a shot, and I hope it happens soon. I know Pop is coaching the Olympics, and I know that he's close to retirement, but I'm with you. I really hope she gets a chance to prove herself, and I hope she does well, because I do feel like she would have been a good choice. Now, I understand why Neil had his guy from the moment. I understand that Dame and Chauncey have a relationship, and Neil and Chauncey have a relationship. I totally get that. But I do think Becky Hammon is going to be a good coach, and I do think that she would be able to develop some of the young players that we need into better defensive players. So I hope she does well. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. I mean, and there were the talks. We talked about this in previous pods, but, the news came out that when they were doing their research on her, they learned that she apparently wasn't very good as a leader and all that, et cetera, et cetera.
Whatever they say.
Again, I don't believe any of that. I don't know what the sources are on that. I really think that there was just a way to try to make it look like, hey, we went with Billups over her because of this, because they wanted to try to clear up the fact that they didn't hire the first woman head coach. It was a PR thing. So I think she's going to make a great leader. I think she's going to be great with that young core that San Antonio is building upon. DeRozan's probably gone. LaMarcus is retired. So it's all Keldon Johnson and White and Murray and a lot of these other young pieces that they're going to have the next few years. And I'm glad that she gets to be around those guys and hope she gets that chance. So I'm with you. I agree. It didn't really affect me in one way or the other. I mean, I didn't take them as negative comments. I think people just asked her, how did you feel? Like, this is your first shot. And I think she was just answering honestly. I don't think it was meant to be a slight in any kind of a way.
Definitely. So we talk about Pop a little bit, and we talk about the Olympics. Probably one of the bigger things is Dame is not only an Olympic USA athlete, but he's kind of, to me, we're through 3 games now of kind of the exhibition period, but through 3 games, he's felt like a focal point of the team and of the news coverage. He's been a starter, and he's been on some of the interviews with Popovich after the game. So what have you seen from Dame at the Olympics, and what does it mean to the Blazers franchise that we have an Olympian?
Well, he's doing Dame stuff. I mean, he's out there hitting big threes, deep threes. He's been very consistent scoring. Argentina, he got 13, so they didn't need him as much last week because they blew him out. Australia, he got 22 points the exhibition game. He got 16 at the first half, and the team blew it after that. And then Nigeria, he put up 14. But people remember that they're only playing 20-something minutes a game right now. It's a little different than a normal NBA game. So those are actually pretty good numbers considering, the Beals and the Durants aren't doing much more than that. So I think it's great, man. I'm not paying too much, again, attention to the exhibition games. I'm ready to watch him in Tokyo as far as the actual competition goes. Mm-hmm. I think we have, in my opinion, we have the second best player on probably in all the Olympics. I mean, Durant, I think, is number one. And outside of that, I mean, there are other guys that are out there that are obviously good players and all that. But I think right now you're going to see Dame just light up European basketball and these guys, and he's going to go out there and just dominate when he gets going. We know how clutch he is. We know how competitive he gets. Mm-hmm. People need to remember that they've only had a couple weeks of practice. You give them a couple more, you go into the Olympics with a structure. And at the end of the day, man, the Olympics to me is the ultimate player versus coach philosophy. We talk about this being a players' league, that players make these coaches look better than they are. Teams that need to have multiple stars, it's the only way you're going to do good in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Granted, we have so much evidence to prove our theory, but for those who don't agree with that necessarily, and that coaching makes a huge difference, Yeah, put 5 all-stars on a team with a bench full of all-stars, and let's see what they do against the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, as it's failed before. I mean, there's been times USA didn't do as good as we thought they would do, but I'm sorry. I think that this team, Dame's going to be able to lead with Durant's co-piloting him. These younger guys like Tatum, I think that they're going to be able to do really good stuff. So I'm excited to watch that. And as far as what it means for Portland, well, obviously it's nothing but good stuff, right? It's publicity. It puts the Blazers on the spotlight. We haven't had an Olympian since what, Clyde? So Drexler. I mean, that's forever ago. I didn't even know they had Olympics. This was still like the Greeks out there participating when Clyde was the Olympics. They're still wearing togas.
Yeah.
But no, it'll be really cool. It'll be even better if he gets a gold. I hope he does. You never know. I mean, the team's looked rough. They're 1-2 in exhibition games so far. So not amazing statistically. They're giving up a lot of threes. The defense has been pretty bad, and I kind of think that's to be expected. None of these guys are great defenders. I mean, Bam Adebayo is fine. Durant can play defense, but let's be real. I mean, there's not a lot of defense out there, and they've been shut down by some teams that are playing defense so far and hitting threes. Nigeria crushed them from the 3-point game. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm stoked, man. I'm excited to actually start watching him, see what he does on a worldwide stage. This is some of the most prime spotlight that he's going to get outside of, primetime TV games here and there on TNT and ESPN playoffs, etc. This will be his real good chance to showcase to the rest of the world. And it's also great for recruiting. What do you think about that?
That's what I wrote down. I wrote down recruiting potentially for someone, because some of these guys, I mean, in the second game, Dame was the best player for most of that game. And part of that game, they sort of just gave the ball to him and basically made him create. They were like, here you go. It was like watching the Blazers again, right? It's here, Dame, bail us out. And I do think I wrote down recruiting as one of the things. The other thing that I wrote down is, he's going to play with Draymond Green. He's going to play with Kevin Durant. He's going to play with Bradley Beal. He's going to play with Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Now, I understand he plays with those players in all-star games, but those games are really, there's no plays being drawn up. There's no. It's just literally like there's no defense. There's no effort. It's just, go out there and put on a show. In these Olympics, he's being coached by Greg Popovich. Like, he's going to be learning things he has not learned in his 9 years. And I understand that you look at his resume and you're like, the guy's been an all-star and an MVP and all these things. There's still room to grow. There's still room to get better. And there's still room to help his teammates get better by saying, well, when I was playing with Draymond Green in the Olympics, this is how our defensive coverage looked. This is how we communicated defensively. This is how Popovich taught us how to communicate. So at the end of the day, we talk about this a lot, but I still think that there's a level of leadership. Dame can elevate this team a little bit, and he can sort of be a coach on the floor. I do agree with you recruiting, and I think experience is huge for this.
Yeah, and I kind of made a joke about the recruiting thing because realistically, the Blazers won't be in a situation where they can get free agents. So recruiting's not really it's more so if a guy wants to be traded, that you start to see Portland be on his top lists of destinations, right? When you say recruiting, it's like, if Beal really wants out of Washington,
who knows?
Beal's like, let me go play with Scott Brooks and Damian Lillard and be their shooting guard. Like, maybe you figure out some kind of a miracle to make that happen. I don't know. But that's when I say recruiting. I mean, it's very unlikely Dame's going to ever play with any of these guys ever again, and as long as he's in Portland. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a sad truth for us, but it's always possible. And part of the thing is getting guys to want to play with you. I mean, Harden last year when he was demanding his trade out of Houston, Portland was one of the teams. It's always going to be Brooklyn probably, but the fact that he said Portland on my list of teams that I want to go is already kind of telling you the impact that Dame has on the rest of the league and that guys want to play with him. I mean, we've seen the trade rumors flying left and right. All over the place when it comes to Dame's name, and that's because he's gotten to that point now where people want to see players play with him or him play with other players, etc. And now you're starting to see that those waves go out into the league, and that's where hopefully that leads a guy to Portland at some point. And who knows?
We can hope.
And that brings me to my next pick for you. That's all I have on the Olympic stuff, and this is kind of where we're gonna shift focus. We're gonna talk about some of that Dame stuff that I just mentioned, but I want to go ahead and touch on our favorite segment, because I kind of like doing it in the middle of the show now. I feel like it's a great way to go over some of the bigger news to some of the more rumory news as we transition to the second half of the pod. My Blazing, New Trails, Player of the Week. I know it's everybody's favorite segment. I get it. I mean, this is what people watch the podcast for. I don't want to make them wait to the end of the video for it.
All right, let's do it.
Damon Stoudemire is my guy.
Nice.
For those who don't know, he was a big part of our team back in the early 2000s, late 90s. During those runs, we had Rasheed Wallace, as last week's Blazing New Trails player, and this was his main teammate. This was Mighty Mouse. This was the point guard of point guards before Damian Lillard was the point guard of point guards. So my news on him, if people haven't heard yet, he is actually going to be an assistant coach with the Boston Celtics. They are taking anyone and everyone out of Portland, with Doka getting the job, and then obviously the assistant now with Stoudemire going there. They had Evan Turner as an assistant. We've covered that earlier in the year. So they're just all about the ex-Portland guys. So happy for him. I think it's cool that he's going to get into an NBA coaching gig. I don't know much of if he's coached before in the NBA. I don't believe he has. I know he's done some stuff not with the NBA. I know he's done some other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool for him. It's going to be great to see. Again, when Boston comes to Portland, he's one of those guys that will get a good ovation when he's here. As an assistant. Go to the live games like we do. You'll get to see a lot of that stuff. You get to see these guys and talk with media and all that stuff. It's always fun. So that's really cool, man. I'm happy for him. You have a Stoudemire memory that you're fond of?
I watched, actually, like, it's funny because the Jail Blazers were definitely my introduction to the Blazers when I was really young, 10, 11, 12.
Sure.
And Damon Stoudemire was my guy. He was the dude that I tuned in to watch him. Sheed, obviously, Brian Grant. There was just a lot of guys, but Damon Stoudemire to me was Portland. He was the epitome of the point guard position, and I played with him in NBA Jam, and I did all this stuff with him. So yeah, he was definitely he was one of my dudes, right? And at our age, he was one of the guys we grew up on. The other thing is, I think Portland and Blazers Twitter, who's like the hardcore Blazers Twitter, is really jealous of the Boston Celtics right now. And we wish that we had their coaching situation. And every time they hire somebody, it's like Blazers Twitter just loses its mind over, like the hot ex-girlfriend that's going to the Celtics now. Like, it is what it is, man. It's so awkward, but it's so true because everybody's so jealous of this. And the way that they've put it together is all the right ways, right? Like, Boston's done a fantastic job of hiring these guys and putting them in the position to succeed. So we'll see how it goes for them. But I hope Damon does well there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they got a good young team to work with, and at this point, their point guard situation is so iffy that he might just suit up and go play point guard. He's probably better than anything they have now that Kemba's gone. I don't know. I mean, I'm all for it. But yeah, you got Brown and Tatum as a good all-star core there to work around. So happy for him. It's pretty cool. I just figured, I touching on the old guys, all these guys that were around from that era. I'll find out more. We'll go figure out what Scottie Pippen and Bonzi Wells are doing these days. I'm sure. I'll get you guys all the lowdown. Stay tuned. Sure. Yeah, stay tuned.
Zebo, where's Zebo at?
Where is Zebo at?
I don't know.
Tired doing. Yeah. I haven't seen him since he was in Memphis.
Doing Zebo.
But that's that. That's my segment. Okay. So that's who I got for that. And that kind of brings me to, so we'll circle back around real quick to some of these rumors. And I haven't heard anything obviously come out that had any kind of stock to it when it comes to Damian Lillard trades. Obviously, you've heard every single team. I swear to God, I've seen them, like we talked about, photoshopped in more jerseys than I thought was possible. Hats off to anybody that knows how to use Photoshop out there. You're all staying very busy and doing a very good job.
Yep.
But I did see the report that internal discussions were made and had by the Golden State Warriors in an attempt to create a package for Damian Lillard. Now, this is the first time I don't know how much salt there is in this. I don't know how much reliability there is in this report, and it's probably nothing serious, but it came out and it caught my attention. So if Golden State were to put a package together for Damian Lillard, what kind of package do you think Golden State would be able to put up? What are you trying to get back to give them Damian Lillard? And to be fair, I'm taking Curry off the table. Golden State would never give up Curry. It's just he's their golden boy. Never going to happen. Everything else on the table, what does it take for you to give them Dame?
I don't see any reason why you would even pick up the phone for anyone who's calling about Dame. You just immediately say he's not for trade for two reasons. If you're what's the best package? Okay, let's build the best package we could from Golden State, but that doesn't include Curry. So we're going to take Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and a young asset like either Wiseman or Wiggins or like whatever you want to throw in as that kind of, because you don't want to take on two old guys because Draymond is getting up there and Klay's getting up there. How is that going to make your team any better just getting a bunch of stuff like ragamuffins. How's that going to relieve salary cap? It's not. How's it going to give us young assets? It's not. Like, I don't see why. Number one, I would not trade Damian Lillard at all at this point. There's nothing you're going to get back for him, and I certainly wouldn't do it to your rival Golden State, who has been big brother for the last 5 years, and beating us up left and right. So no, and no. But if there's, I mean, like, is there a Dame situation where you would accept the trade for him at all right now?
Not unless you're getting an MVP caliber player back. Dame's in his prime, and he's in his prime. He's starting his Supermax extension, so absolutely not. No. The media would love to see him play somewhere else, I am sure, because they love their super teams. But at this point, yeah, Klay Thompson, you obviously have to get him back because they won't play 3 guards probably anyway. They might, I don't know, but chances are you ask for that. And him coming off of his bum Achilles, and then Draymond Green would have to be included. They've already been talking about removing Draymond. They have 2 top 10 picks. I know they have 2 picks in the lottery. I don't remember exactly when they are, but you'd have to take both of those picks from them. It's like,
I just don't see it.
You're Golden State. You probably don't want to do it anyway because you're just completely destroying your future and all the rest of the team that's around you. And it's just going to basically be the Curry and Dame show, which don't get me wrong, you're bombing up threes left and right. You're putting up 60 points a game out of those 2, but where are you going to get the other 60 points? So that too. The defense is going to continue to be porous. I mean, I just don't. It came out, and I laughed at it a little bit. No one wanted to take on it because that's the first internal discussion. Every single team has had internal discussions about how they possibly think they can get Damian Lillard. I mean, obviously with Philly, it's all been no more of the CJ for Ben Simmons trade. Nope, that's died off. Now it's all Damian Lillard for Ben Simmons. I don't know what Philly's doing over there, man. I just don't. I don't get it. Like, stick to the cheesesteaks. That's what you guys know. You don't know how to pull off trades.
Yesterday,
Ben Simmons.
Simmons officially hit the market. They were exploring trades. There was like the Kings, Minnesota. There's a few teams that are interested, but I just the Ben Simmons thing is still weird. There's still really not that big of a market for him. I do think CJ is still going to be the best player that they could get for Ben Simmons, like just highest ceiling player. But it depends on if they want someone his age. The other question that I have for you is, when do these teams that have Dane or CJ or Simmons or whoever they want to trade, like this asset, when's the timing of that going to go down? Is it going to go down at the draft? Is it going to go down before free agency? Is it going to go down? Because it could happen anytime. When is the ideal time to trade a CJ if you want to move off of him and build your team?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to get back. So there's going to be teams that have stars, so they're going to try to move, and you're going to see they're not contenders. You're going to see before the draft, because they're going to want picks back, right? Right now, if you're Portland and you're saying I'm going to trade you Damian Lillard, you're going to get 2 first-round picks back because you're basically giving up, right? You're done. Like you're saying, take Lillard, we're done. When you're Philly right now and you're talking about trading Ben Simmons, you still have Tobias Harris, and you obviously still have an MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. You're not trading Ben Simmons to start a rebuild or to get young assets back. You are trading Ben Simmons, an all-star, to attempt to get a better all-star fit, at least, for Joel Embiid and to try to utilize with that team. I think it's the same with a lot of these guys. Like, you're going to start hearing all sorts of random little names pop up, but most of these teams are going to be in contending status, and the contenders aren't going to give away any players. So the stuff like Ben Simmons, it could happen any time. I don't think you say, it's going to obviously be before the draft. I can see it happening during the draft. I think if you're going to go and you're going to get rid of Ben Simmons, let's say you've called some teams now, you're asking for guys like, just say Jaylen Brown or whatever. You're trying to get like these low-end all-stars, maybe a Zach LaVine, you know what I mean? Like, give us Zach LaVine and we'll give you, Chicago, here, take Ben Simmons. Then you might be asking for a little more pick swapping to have happen. Maybe you think Ben Simmons is going to be that guy. Okay. Now let's say you don't get any of those all-stars. None of those guys are available. It seems like I don't want Ben Simmons, not for Jaylen Brown, you fool. So then you start looking at what Philly can get back from him. They've already basically come out and given up on the guy. It's done. Yep. Like, he had that poor playoff experience. They've publicly announced he's on the market. So let's say you don't get the Zach LaVines or the Jaylen Browns or those low-end all-stars that you have a shot at, maybe. Now you're starting to try to get assets back. Now you're getting a young player, and you're like, okay, give me a couple picks and give me this young guy who I think can be good in a few years. Now you're starting to look at the De'Aaron Foxes of the world. Now you're starting to look at these guys who aren't quite all-stars yet, show a lot of potential of being an all-star with teams that have cap space and teams that probably have good picks, or at least lottery picks. That's when you're going to start hearing teams like the Kings pop up. Minnesota's could start popping up. Maybe they go after a guy like, D'Angelo Russell, who, again, I know he's at this point probably considered a vet, had a couple small all-star stints under his belt, but I wouldn't call him a Levine or Jaylen Brown at this point with his level of play, but he's still going to be able to score a ton. He can shot create. Yep. So maybe that's a better fit, and Minnesota can take him, and they want to pair Simmons with Karl-Anthony Towns. So now you start looking at those teams come into play, but Minnesota is going to have to give up picks to do it, and they have lottery picks to do so, right? So that's the kind of stuff you're going to start seeing. So if Simmons is going to go for a big star, you're going to see it happen probably pretty soon, especially now that he's on the trade block. It's out there publicly. I would say if he's not moved in a week to a week and a half, then it's going to come down to draft day, and you're going to start seeing a young player in picks, and they're going to start making that move. That's what they're going to look to do. As far as a guy like CJ goes, again, if you're Portland, you're not in a rush. You don't have to be in a rush. You're going to try to take advantage probably on draft day of a lot of that stuff. Again, you're in kind of the same situation, but you don't have Ben Simmons. You have a guy who's not an all-star. So you're going to start going after these teams saying, hey, we really want to try to get this. We got CJ for you. You're going to go after the Ben Simmons. You're going to go after the Zach Levines of the world, those other guys that I mentioned, a lot of those same types of players, and you're going to try to make that move. And then what's going to happen is you're probably not going to get it done. Portland, I don't think trade CJ for assets at this point. I just don't. I wish they would. If we can't get a star back or a better fit for Dame, at least get off the money, at least try to do something to get some young players back and move on to some extent. But I also think that CJ's best value to us is getting a player around Dame. That's the mode you're in. You're in win now mode. So CJ's a guy that I could see potentially being floated around at draft time, just because even though I don't think the Blazers will do it, I can see them potentially saying, hey, let's try to go get a younger guy and give us your first round pick and you can have CJ.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But that's kind of the timing of how I think things are going to go down. It depends on the players and rumors that become available, but the fact that Simmons is publicly announced, I don't think you're going to wait long if it's going to be a big move. And if it's not, then you're going to see it on draft day.
I think Neil's going to lay low with the CJ stuff until, and if a big deal actually happened, we would hear about it when it happens, not before. Mm-hmm. That's something I don't think the mainstream media understands about Portland is Neil works in the shadows, and he does not tip his hand until it's actually happened. Like the Nurk thing was a complete surprise. Norman Powell was pretty surprising. A lot of these deals, you don't hear the rumors for days and days.
Covington.
I'd be surprised. What do you think about Colin Sexton? I know he became available this week, and they're talking about him. How would you feel about just like a CJ for Colin Sexton and a pick or something?
Yeah, that came up. That was on the media for a while. That was a big rumor. Obviously, with Sexton being available, CJ again being the number one trade asset was the guy that kept coming up. I'm all out. I'm sorry, I'm all out. I've seen reasons that I wasn't completely against. I've seen the pros of doing it. You get a young asset. Mm-hmm. You get a guy who's only, 23, 25. I don't even know how old
24. Yeah, he's young.
Whatever, he's young.
Cheap.
He's already putting up CJ level points. I mean, he's already putting up really good statistics. Again, he's in the East, and there's nobody else on Cleveland that's taking anything away from him. So it's kind of like, hey, Sexton, go score 50 a night. That's not going to happen on a team like the Blazers. He's 6'1". He doesn't play a lot of defense. He's a hustle guy, strong, good finisher of the rim, very fast. I like that level of his play, and I like his age. But again, this is a guy that's potentially going to get a decent contract in a couple of years. I don't think he brings Damian Lillard a championship. I don't think he brings him a championship. He's not on that contender level at this point. There's a reason Cleveland's not wanting to bring him back. Like, they have money. You know what I mean? They could easily say, Sexton, we want to keep you and Garland around for the next couple of years and make you guys our focal point when we move off a guy like Love and really start the transition into that new era. The fact that they're making him available tells you a lot of stuff. I've heard he's a bad locker room guy. He's apparently getting into fights with coaches. There's a lot of negativity around him. And again, being on a losing team in the East mentally does some stuff to you.
Sure.
You see a lot of those guys get out of those situations and end up going on to be better players. Like, you're not even in the East, I guess, but just bad teams in general. Look at Levine in Minnesota. They've struggled for years. He goes to Chicago. He's an all-star.
Yep.
So I mean, it's definitely possible that the stuff we've heard about his attitude gets better coming to Portland, but no, you're not trading CJ McCollum for Colin Sexton at this point. Like you just don't.
How does
I
that
just
look to
don't see how it
Dame?
helps Dame.
Yeah, I was gonna say your optics are trying to keep Dame and give him an all-star caliber player to pair him with. Why would you? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense from the defensive standpoint. If you want to get younger and cheaper, that's fine, but it's not going to elevate your ceiling. You would only be kicking off a rebuild, and that is not something that Dame is going to want to be a part of. So it doesn't make sense. The other Cavalier that's going to be available, he's an Olympian. He's amazing.
Oof.
He's an all-star. He's from Portland. Kevin Love.
Yeah, I feel like we've this deja vu. They feel like we've talked about Kevin Love in the podcast before. All I'm saying is the potential chance to have 2 gold medalists in Portland. 2. And let's go a step further. Okay,
Melo's a gold medalist.
Is Carmelo in a gold medal? Did he
Melo's
win a gold?
Yes, he won him.
He's a gold medalist, right?
Who cares?
Bring him back. I'll have 3 gold. You have absolutely nothing for defense and all sorts of old age power forwards that can only score the basketball. But gosh dang, having 3 gold medalists on the team USA over here. Like they don't even need to. They just bring the Blazers to Tokyo. We're good.
He looks bad. Kevin Love doesn't even. He played like 3 minutes the other night, and he looked bad. And he's done nothing in 3 years that makes you think that he should even be on the Olympic team. The fact that he got picked is kind of a travesty and a slap in the face.
I don't know where that came from. I have no idea where that came from.
He cannot do this unless he gets completely bought out and he is the Melo of next year. I don't want him.
That, my friend, that right there is the golden ticket. Okay, so the news, if people were wondering, is sources have said that Cavaliers are likely to buy out Kevin Love. They're done with him.
But
they're going to take their hit
in here. He's going to want a vet minimum in LA.
No, that's you say that. You say that, but Kevin Love says otherwise. Kevin Love was interviewed, and Kevin Love once again put Portland at the top of the list of teams that he would want to go play for because at this point in his career, like LaMarcus, he would love to be able to come home. Yeah. I mean, he's at different stages in his career than LaMarcus, let's be real. But he did say that he would come here for a very cheap deal if it brought me to get to come back to Portland. Now, I don't know how much of that is true because Brooklyn Nets were another team that was said to be extremely interested in him, and I saw the Clippers. Those 2 teams are interested in every single thing that goes onto the market. I mean, you could, at this point, you could toss
Lakers into everything.
I don't anybody out there, and they're like, yeah, give him. I don't know. I couldn't come up with a good name. That was an awkward pause. I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen and move on. But my point is, those guys are after him, and they're obviously much better contenders than Portland at this point. And I'm all for it. You give Kevin Love $2 to $3 million, give him 1 year, see what he can do, bring him on there. I don't care if he starts at power forward. For number 1 big off the bench, abso-freaking-lutely. Like I told you about some of these guys that really their play goes down in bad teams. Kevin Love, I think, still has some stuff in the tank. We've seen Blake Griffin play really good for the Nets, and at his age, with the role that he's been asked to do, he's dunking on people left and right now in Brooklyn. We haven't seen him dunk in 3 years in Detroit. I mean, it's like you get these guys out of these situations, you get them back into a crowd like Portland with a leader like Dame, you start winning games again. It brings us something different out of you. Now, the injury is going to be there, and that's why you don't pay for him. If he's willing to come here for $2-3 million, so at the most you wasted $3 million on a guy that didn't get to play much. Yeah. So be it. But if you get even half of the version of the prime Kevin Love, you get him at healthy, and he's playing at this point in his career half of what he was giving Cleveland during the finals runs and early Minnesota days, then you're looking at essentially probably to me a better version of Carmelo. He's not going to give you a lot of defense, although. He actually, I think he had 6 steals in the finals. He holds the record for most steals in a game in the finals, but during the Cleveland series. But either way, he's a bigger body. He's a great rebounder. He can shoot the 3. He can post score. He can do pretty much everything you need him to do. He's still capable of going out there and giving you 20 points. I'd rather have him at this point, age-wise, and everything else, just being a hometown guy over a guy like Carmelo at the same bit of money. I think Love could come here and do great things. We're $3 million, sign me up. And the other thing that Portland, you have to start talking about is what kind of guys you're going to get for that kind of money, because that's basically the only free agency moves that you have at this point are vet mins. You're going to have to get a guy like to come in here and play for cheap, and you're not the Lakers, you're not the Clippers, you're not the Nets. Like if a guy like Kevin Love becomes available, you jump on that just like you jumped on Melo wanting to come back. Like I know that it didn't necessarily work out, but you have to take those chances on some of these guys because you're just not going to get a lot of better options. And having a vet all-star championship on caliber guy on your team, I'm all for it. So
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if he wants to come for Vetman, that's fine. Anything else is just not doable for us.
You're definitely not trading for him. I mean, you're definitely not trading any kind of an asset for him at this point. It has to be a buyout. And at this point, I'm just as homeless as the Nets and the Clippers at this point. Like, toss something out, I'm gonna take it. Like, give me whatever you can get. I want all your spare change when it comes to some Vetmans and these guys that have had this kind of experience and are all-star caliber guys.
Yeah. That's all I had for the rumor mill. Do you have anything else on your notes?
No, I honestly don't. I don't have anything else to talk about. It's kind of all I've seen so far. Obviously, with the combine and the draft coming up and free agency coming up, we're going to start hitting things hard. We're actually really looking forward to next week. I think next week, whenever we end up getting to the pod, it won't be like a set schedule or anything. But when we do go to record next week, we'll really start to focus on some free agency prepper. We're going to really start to look at some of the guys that are hitting the market, the kind of deals we think some of these guys might get, the fits that could potentially be a Portland fit, because again, money's going to be really limited unless we announce some huge trade. I don't expect it to be much of a Blazers free agent podcast, but we'll still talk about guys that are out there and who we hope to see maybe come and wear the black and red next year. But yeah, looking forward to it. If you guys want to see that podcast and listen to our free agency take and know that we have literally nothing better to do with our lives than sit around and look this stuff up for you.
Yeah.
Subscribe, like, follow, all those good things. Hit that subscribe button now. Like the video. It does us wonders. We appreciate it. Ask us questions, comment. Last week was great. We try to respond to everybody if we can. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook. We're not big on the Facebook and Instagram, sorry, but we'll definitely engage with y'all on Twitter all day. And in the comments in this section. At this point, I don't think it really needs to be said because technically you should have done this in the intro. I'm going to hold you accountable for that. But if you're not into the video side of this, we do have the audio only versions. You can pretty much follow us on any podcast site. Anybody that watches us knows that's a thing. So yeah, Spotify, Apple. Again, you've already probably watched the video, so you don't care. But, if you have friends that are like, hey, I got this cool Blazers podcast, check them out. Oh, I don't like YouTube. Great. Look them on Spotify or Apple or anything. So share the news, word of mouth. It's great for us. We appreciate all your time that you spent listening to us. And that's it, man. That's all I got.
Yeah, we're almost to 100 subs on YouTube, which would be fantastic if we could reach that. So if you're listening to the video now, please go subscribe if you're not already, because we're starting to build the community a little bit, and we really want to get to 100. That's a goal we've been talking about for a while.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
If we hit 100 this week, I might do something special for people next week. So yeah, share the word and get those subscribes up. Maybe we'll give away something. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Other than that, man, that's it. And everybody, hope you tune in next week for our big, we're going to do a free agency primer. We'll have more rumors by then and maybe some trades to cover by then in the NBA just in general. So we'll have some ideas on what's going down roster-wise. Other than that, like I said, subscribe, and hit us up on Twitter. We out.
Yep.